On one side, Claressa Shields is dominating headlines with back-to-back interviews that are now igniting controversy across the internet. On the other side, Franchón is pushing back publicly, arguing that the story being told isn't complete and demanding her perspective be taken seriously. Meanwhile, names like 50 Cent are being pulled into the mix, alleged receipts are surfacing, and social media is turning the whole situation into a heated debate. So the real question is, are we witnessing a simple breakdown in communication exploding online, or something deeper where narratives are being shaped, contested, and influenced in real time? Because when claims, interviews, and receipts begin to contradict each other, that's exactly when the real story starts to emerge, not when it ends. So today we are talking about Claressa Shields. Today we are breaking down the fallout from her Breakfast Club interview, because all of these clips and the statements she made on that platform are now going viral for all the wrong reasons. And Franchón is clearly upset, y'all. Now listen to this. Every time Claressa steps into these interviews and makes new claims, people connected to the situation come forward to push back and challenge those narratives. When she was speaking on Way Up with Angela Yee, Maserati Bud responded with receipts, essentially implying that she was trying to leverage connections tied to 50 Cent for opportunities. He suggested she was actively seeking roles, asking about compensation, and reacting strongly to any chance of being involved in projects. And from his perspective, it wasn't subtle at all. He described her as fully invested in trying to get access and exposure through those connections. Then fast forward back to the Breakfast Club, where the conversation shifts again, and more claims are being made, including statements directed at Franchón, along with references to earlier interviews where similar accusations were repeated. On top of that, there are remarks about how Laila Ali was discussed, which only adds more intensity to the situation. Now there's an ongoing debate about whether hosts like DJ Envy and Charlemagne the God were encouraging the direction of the conversation, but many feel the discussion crossed a line. Some also argue that because of personal relationships involved, particularly connections to Remy Ma, allowing certain narratives to play out unchecked raises questions.
So how can that level of discourse be entertained without scrutiny or pushback? Meanwhile, Franchón is observing everything just like everyone else, and she addressed it directly in the comments under the Breakfast Club post. Before getting into her exact words, there's also side chatter online, including questions about why Lil Scrappy is even involved in the comments under posts discussing whether Papoose is allegedly entangled with Claressa because of money and other factors. At the same time, Claressa has suggested that Papoose is covering certain expenses, while other claims circulating online reference past moments involving Lil Scrappy and alleged recordings when Claressa was seen riding around Atlanta. So naturally, people are asking why he's inserting himself into the discussion in such a visible way. What is he doing? And why step into that kind of spotlight? These reactions are becoming part of the narrative themselves. Now, shifting back, Franchón's response in the comments is where things get direct. She calls out how she and her husband are being spoken about, while only hearing one side of the story being amplified. She questions why individuals are being allowed to make statements about her without accountability. From her perspective, it feels like repeated narratives are being pushed without verification. And when she responds, it's not random frustration, it's a clear pushback against what she believes is a misrepresented situation. Then she also responds to a fan accusing her of lying and insisting they already know the truth. The truth doesn't need defending in her view, and she says people are trying to shut her out from speaking, which she brushes off as fine. When the timing is right, she's ready to speak her side, and she even shrugs it off with that nonchalant attitude. Then she goes further by tagging them again, calling out the Breakfast Club, Charlemagne the God, Jess Hilarious, and DJ Envy, and saying they need to stop allowing Claressa Shields to repeatedly make claims without both sides being presented, arguing that it's irresponsible and biased when the full truth is available. When they're ready, she says she's ready too, making it clear she finds the situation ridiculous. Then someone suggested that Franchón should go on and clear the air, and she responded that she would welcome that opportunity. Now, keep in mind, shortly after the fight, Franchón didn't interview on Way Up with Angela Yee, and while she may have appeared on other platforms, she hasn't been featured on shows like The Breakfast Club.
Meanwhile, Claressa Shields has appeared on Way Up, The Breakfast Club, and is also set to appear on an upcoming podcast with Melissa Ford, as well as another platform where she's expected to speak further. There's even talk about additional appearances and content, but not everything mentioned is fully released across streaming platforms yet. That inconsistency is exactly what's raising questions for some viewers. And honestly, it's hard to ignore how the rollout of content versus what's actually available creates confusion. You know what I mean? It starts to feel uneven.
But beyond that, there's growing criticism about The Breakfast Club becoming more biased and one-sided, with claims that it no longer allows people to come on and challenge narratives freely. Some argue that if certain personalities are being promoted or protected, then the format itself may be influenced by outside interests. But here's the issue. Previous guests like Layla Ali have appeared before and shared their perspective. Claressa Shields, however, is being accused of misinterpreting those conversations and reframing them in a way that benefits her own narrative. The same criticism is now being applied to how she's responding to Franchón Cruz, with claims that she isn't fully engaging with what was actually said. Instead, the argument is that she's taking selective parts of statements and using them to build a broader response. Now imagine if similar accusations were made against high-profile figures like LeBron James or Michael Jordan. You'd expect them to have the chance to respond directly and defend themselves. But in this case, some viewers feel that dynamic isn't being applied consistently. That's where the frustration builds, especially around how Black women are represented and discussed in these conversations. Some believe narratives are being pushed without proper balance unless there's a clear incentive or agenda behind them. And when you zoom out, it starts to look less like isolated moments and more like a pattern. At the center of it all, people are pointing back to the ongoing tension tied to the 50 Cent dynamic. There's also speculation involving multiple individuals, including references to Papoose, with claims that others like Remy Ma are connected indirectly through relationships and public interactions. Meanwhile, some online discussions even bring up names like Lil Scrappy and unrelated comment threads, which only adds to the noise. Franchón Cruz's name continues to come up alongside all of this, even though her direct involvement is more about responding than escalating.
And when you look at the broader media circuit, appearances across platforms like The Breakfast Club, Way Up with Angela Yee, and even shows like the Tamron Hall platform show how widely this conversation has spread. Add in newer media ventures and announcements, and it becomes clear this isn't just a single interview issue, it's part of a much larger ongoing media cycle. Make it make sense. And so, Claressa Shields, at least at first glance, the whole idea behind these interviews seemed like it was meant to reintroduce her as an artist and bring attention back to her music. But now it's starting to feel like the real focus is repeatedly bringing up claims about allegedly sending 50 Cent a cease and desist and accusing him of spreading false narratives, while somehow people like Maserati Bud are not being addressed, despite reportedly having receipts and past material connected to her. But honestly, it creates confusion trying to understand why the conversation keeps circling back to 50 Cent when he's the one with the influence, connections, and leverage in these situations. But at the same time, it raises a serious question. Why position yourself against someone who has the resources to escalate things legally and potentially drain you in the process? And that concern becomes even more relevant when you consider the financial strain already being imposed by a music career that hasn't fully taken off or produced consistent results. The music industry today operates very differently compared to just a few years ago, whether that's 5, 10, or 15 years back. The earnings aren't the same anymore, unless you're operating at an A-list level, and at that point you really have to be actively booking shows and building outside revenue streams to stay afloat. Relying purely on streaming alone, which pays out very little per play, isn't enough to create real momentum in today's landscape, and that's something people around the situation clearly understand. Claressa Shields. So with all of that in mind, it becomes even more unclear how she ended up aligned with Win Records in the first place. But at the same time, the pushback from Franchón Cruz is something that stands out. It's also why many people feel like The Breakfast Club should have given her a platform to present her side directly through an interview, because it doesn't sit right when someone can be spoken about without a fair chance to respond. At the same time, there's a growing concern about how easily statements are being accepted, whether it's due to fandom or simply avoiding confrontation.
And that leads to another issue. Why continue entertaining claims without pushing back or verifying them? During the interview process, Lauren LaRosa did attempt to step in a few times to redirect the conversation and provide context around why people online were reacting the way they were. However, at certain points, Claressa Shields either struggled to fully address the concerns or shifted topics in a way that left some viewers feeling like the questions weren't being directly answered. From that perspective, it came across as though the moment became difficult to navigate, especially when pressure built around the responses being given. And when you step back and look at everything together, it starts to feel inconsistent and unresolved. A smear campaign is being alleged toward Layla Ali, another toward Franchón Cruz, and yet no clear accountability or consequences are being addressed transparently. That's exactly why people are questioning the bigger picture. A lot of you are sitting back watching this unfold and feeling like she's being handed a microphone to say whatever she wants, while others are left with no equal chance to respond. And that's exactly where the frustration starts. And if this is supposed to be a credible radio platform, then allowing Franchón Cruz to speak her side should be the bare minimum. On top of that, Angela Yee should be reaching back out to let her respond directly to what came out of Claressa Shields' interview. Right now, it feels like Claressa can go on these platforms, talk freely and set the tone, while everyone else is forced to react through comments or separate outlets just to be heard. And in the middle of all that, the ongoing tension tied to 50 Cent and earlier disputes involving Papoose keeps getting referenced, but without clarity on how anyone else actually benefits from it. At the same time, discussions around Layla Ali and Franchón Cruz are happening without them being consistently given the same space to respond. So what ends up happening is certain voices are amplified, while others are pushed to the margins, and that imbalance is what people are calling out. It raises the question of whether the priority is truth or simply what's trending in the moment. Because once something gains traction, it seems to be treated as content first, rather than a conversation that needs fairness. That's why some viewers feel like the focus has shifted toward engagement rather than accuracy. And when you look at how these interviews are structured, it starts to feel like only one narrative is being centered at a time.
There's even a sense that platforms are leaning into whatever will generate the most attention, instead of ensuring both sides are properly represented. Now, whether you agree with that or not, that perception is what's fueling a lot of the criticism right now. You've got people questioning why names like Tiny Harris are even being suggested for appearances, while the core individuals directly involved aren't getting equal opportunity to speak. Then you see random moments like Lil Scrappy popping up in comment sections, which only adds to the confusion and makes the whole situation feel even more scattered. And at this point, the chaos surrounding the topic is almost overshadowing the facts being discussed. So the simple question people keep coming back to is, why is the structure so one-sided when multiple perspectives clearly exist? Make it make sense. Because from this angle, it doesn't look balanced, and that imbalance is exactly what's being challenged. And before this wraps, there's still a lot of frustration being expressed about how these conversations are being handled publicly. People are asking for consistency, accountability, and equal opportunity for response across the board. Without that, the situation just keeps looping with no resolution in sight. That's all.